Alright, hello everybody. This is going to be a short tutorial for setting up an automatic scene switcher to be used with specifically a Nintendo DS or 3DS and Dragon Quest IX. It could be applied to other video games also, but the specific settings and logic that I'm going to be using applies to DQ9, and you can adapt it if you need to for other games, but this is the game that I want to show. So the way I'm going to be doing this is I have a new 3DS, well, a new 2DS XL, a capture board. It's hooked up to my capture software, and I'm going to be using a couple of tools to help me out. I'm going to be using some settings in OBS. I'm going to be using AutoHotKey, and I'm going to be using a tool called Sizer. So OBS you should already have. If you're using XSplit, I'm assuming that the hotkeys can be configured the same way. I'm not really sure, but I'm going to search for AutoHotKey, and the first link here is for AutoHotKey. You just click download, and you download the current version. It'll give you an installer, and you just run the installer. That's all there is to it. The second tool is Sizer. This is optional, but I find it very helpful, and we'll explain why a little bit later. It's the first link. There's an installer package or a zip package. I'm using the zip package, but feel free to use whichever version you want. That's going to let us control the window sizing a little bit better, which you'll see why that's important later. So I'm going to go ahead and launch the game. One thing that you might notice, or I want to mention, I guess, is that because I'm playing on a 3DS or a 2DS, by default when you're playing a DS game, it tries to actually span the full screen, and the size of the screen and the resolution of the screen on the 3DS is actually a little bit bigger than the DS, so it ends up a little bit blurry, and it kind of affects the output, which is important because we need to match on colors and certain aspects of the output. So if you hold start and select when launching a game on the DS, the 3DS, it'll actually launch in the native resolution mode for DS games. So you can see that I've got these borders around. I'll turn my camera off and switch just to capture now. But you can see how I've got borders around the screens, and that's because it's actually outputting directly at the DS resolution, which means things are a lot more crisp and a lot more accurate in terms of the color profiles. So I'm going to get into game, and I'll give you a basic example of what we're looking to do. There's a couple of different options for how to approach this, but you can see when we're kind of just running around the world, the bottom screen has the characters and the top screen has just a map. Obviously, in this case, you want the bottom screen to be the one that's bigger or more in focus for viewers. And unfortunately, when you get into combat, that kind of changes a little bit. So let's go through a turn of combat just so we can see what happens. So in combat, the top screen shows your characters and the enemy, and the bottom screen shows the menu. Here you have kind of two options. I've seen people have it so that whenever you're in combat, the top screen is always in focus. The menu is always the little one. I actually prefer showing the menu while you're selecting your character actions and showing the top screen only when those actions are actually being carried out, because I think viewers want to see the character actions being selected. So you can do it either way. We'll go over both options. And the way we're going to accomplish this is we're going to use a script that watches the bottom screen window. So you may notice that you've got 4 characters listed, and there's a rectangle around each character, and as the character selected changes, the rectangle moves with them. So the logic we're going to use for this game is we're going to look at the top left and the bottom left pixel, and we're going to be looking for that brownish color. And if either of those pixels are brown, that means we're in combat. So that's kind of step one. If you just want to match on in combat and you always want the top screen to focus in combat, you can kind of stop there. If you want it set up where it actually still continues to show the menu while you're selecting your actions, then you also need to look at the positions of the white borders around these 4 rectangles that move with the selected character. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to open up the wrong AutoHotKey script, and I'll show you why in a second. And then I'm also going to open up my script in, actually I still have it open, in Notepad++. So hopefully this is readable on the screen. This is a pretty short script. There's not much to it. This top stuff is just kind of, basic AutoHotKey stuff. This actually doesn't even do anything. This was originally, I was going to put in a shortcut to start and stop it, but I was having trouble with it, so it doesn't actually work. This is the part that's important. So I'll also provide this script in the description of the video, so that way you can download it and modify it to fit your needs also. So current state is 0. What I take this to mean is that we're not in combat. So, or shouldn't even say that we're not in combat, specifically that I want the bottom screen to be the one showing. So you're not in combat, or it's the menu that's being displayed. I'm setting the coordinate mode for the script. This is how it's reading the coordinates of, or the color values of the pixels. And I'm matching on the window title. And then I'm just doing a loop. So within this loop, it will be checking for pixel values constantly, as long as the script is running. So first step is if the window is active, if this window is active, and it's matching on this AutoHotKey class of this. So the reason I launched the wrong script earlier is when you have a script running, this little icon appears in your system tray, this little H, and you can right click on it and go to Window Spy. And what this does is it brings up this menu, which actually gives you window information. So I'm going to click on the lower window for my viewer, and you're going to see that it fills in some info, including this AHK class. That's how I'm matching the window. So what this means is that this script, or the actions within this loop, will only match if this window is selected. What that means is that if I'm streaming or recording my video, and I click outside of this window somewhere, the scenes aren't going to change. It's not going to read any of these pixel values. It's only reading them if this window is selected. So it's really important to keep in mind. It's really easy to click off somewhere and end up wondering why your script isn't changing scenes. It might just be because your window got deselected. Then I'm defining a few variables. So I'm defining pixels for the top left and bottom left pixels, which are the ones I was talking about earlier. They're this one up here and this one down here. And then I'm defining pixels for 4 character borders. So all this is looking at is, obviously these borders are wide. It's just looking at one spot of it. And it's determining whether character 1, 2, 3, or 4 have their actions being selected. So the way I'm determining that is also by using this Window Spy application. So you can see when I have this window selected, Window Spy has these 2 fields, this client and color field. They're going to be really important. So if we look at the client field, as I move my mouse around within this bottom window, it adjusts the number here, and that's my position within that window. So if you look at the script, I'm matching on 129.2, right? And 129.766. What that means is that if I select this window and I move my mouse around, I should be able to find, it's really tough to get the right spot, so you're going to have to be a little bit close, but yeah. Anyway, you can see the stuff moving. I'm somewhat close. Yeah. Anyway, you have to figure out exactly what it is for your window. It doesn't matter if it's the exact top left or not. Honestly, you can use something that's just close as long as it doesn't overlap with one of the characters, or as long as you're checking both the top and the bottom. Just pick a pixel, basically. The top left and bottom left corners are convenient, but it can really just be any specific spot you want to look at. And the same for the bottom left. And then these 4 character borders are here. So somewhere around 135 and around 150. On this one, it's somewhere around 135 and 300. Around this one, it's around 450, 135, 450. And then on this one, it's somewhere around 135, 600. The borders are pretty wide, so you've got a lot of leniency there. That's just what's easiest for me to match on. So once we have our variables defined using these client and color, these client spots, you have to look at the color. So one thing that's a little bit weird is that, so you end up with pixels like this. I'm not touching the mouse, but you can see that the red is changing between CA and CB. There are certain pixels where it varies slightly. I don't know why, but you have to account for it if you're using one of those pixels. So we'll get to there in a second. And you may also notice that this is listed in red, green, blue. AutoHotKey is actually going to expect it in blue, green, red. So you're going to have to put the hex values backwards. So if we look at this line 30, this if line, here in my script, we're looking for the top left pixel color being 28589A. Sorry, I can't highlight them well. But this means that the 28 is going to be the blue value, the 58 is going to be the green value, and the 9A is going to be the red value. So if I go to one of these bottom pixels here, somewhere around here, you can see it's 9A is red, 58 is green, and blue is switching between 28 and 29. I move my mouse. So we're matching on either of those, 28 or 29, 58, 9A, for the top left or the bottom left. So there's 4 conditions here. If any 4 of these conditions are true, that means we're on the combat menu. If you want your top screen to always be active in combat, you leave it at that. I want this AND condition to look for the character borders. I still want the bottom screen to be active as long as my actions are being selected. So I have this AND condition in here. So it's also saying if the character borders that we defined earlier, if these pixels are not this FB, F8, FB value, which is what we get if we hover over the white. You can see here. So if you're in combat and none of these 4 characters are choosing their actions, then look at your current state. If your current state is, this part's also optional. Without this, it means that you're going to constantly be sending F7 or F8 hotkeys, which is the hotkeys I'm using here. This means that, like, if you're already in combat, don't resend the combat hotkey. If you're outside of combat, don't resend the outside hotkey. So if your current state is outside of combat, then send F7 and change the state to 1. Otherwise, if none of these match, that means you're not in combat at all. And if your current state is in combat, send F8, and switch the state to out of combat. So basically just flips them. Let me go into OBS settings real quick. And you can also see that I have hotkeys set up for 2 separate scenes. I have a DS top main and a DS bottom main. They're not next to each other for some reason. Where are they? Yeah, they are. And then for bottom main, I have F8 as the hotkey. So that's the outside of combat, which matches up with this. And F7 is the top screen, which matches up in combat, which is this section. So these have to be set up on your scenes. And the way the scenes are set up in OBS is they're exactly the same, except the window positions for the top and bottom ones are swapped. So let me just switch to those real quick so you can see what I'm talking about. This is the top main scene, and this is the bottom main scene. They look exactly the same. They're just the window positions are switched. So one other thing to note is that, at least with a 3DS viewer, under the config option or under the transfer mode option, there's a full color, lightweight, and high color. This can actually affect the colors that are being output within this window, so try to just be consistent with which one you're using. It doesn't matter, just make sure whichever one you're using is the one that matches the script that you're using. So I'm using full color mode. Now, one last factor that's important, and then we'll show it off in action, is that because we're matching on client position, it's affected by the size of the window. So if I resize this, and I'm looking at 129.2. Now all of a sudden, 129.2 isn't the corner, it's up here somewhere. It's clearly wrong. Actually, it's way up here. So the window size has to be consistent. If you resize the window at all, your pixels are suddenly not matching. So that's where that sizer tool that I mentioned earlier comes into play. So I've got this tool, sizer. When you double click it, it just opens a little system tray shortcut. It's going to take a second to open. And I'm going to go into the configure option, and we'll show you what it's like. So you configure these different sizes, and you basically select a resolution. And you can type in the width and the height yourself, and you can tell it whether it's including borders or not including borders. You can tell it to move to a certain point on the screen, whatever you want. But what I do is I define window sizes for my game capture window. And in this case, it should be roughly 4 times the native size of the window. It's not exact because it's counting like window borders, which don't scale with the window. So it's only scaling the video part, etc. Basically figure out how big your window is and configure profiles for it. What that means is that I can go to this bottom window, which I've now resized a bunch. I can press a shortcut, which is defined in the sizer window here. I've got it as Control Window Z, but you can set it to other things, I believe. And it brings up this little window, and then I can select the 3ds bottom 4x size that I defined, and it goes back to the size that I defined. And this should match up, in my case, matches up with the positions I'm using on this script. So I can move windows around and resize them, but if I ever want to use these specific values in the script, this is the size window I should use. Again, it's optional, but if you don't do this and then you resize the window, you might be stuck having to respy all of your positions and colors and all of that. So let's show this off in action. I'm going to exit this incorrect script that I had running and go back in my scripts. So this is the one, I'll rename it, but this is the one that I'm working on here. And I'm going to run it. And as soon as I run it, it's probably going to actually, well, it's not going to do anything yet. So as soon as I run it, it's not going to do anything. As soon as I select this window and start doing actions, it should start running. So it'll actually switch us into the DS scenes on my recording. So I'm going to select this window, and it's not going to do anything yet. But once I select all 4 of these actions, it should switch us into our DS scene. So it's got the top, and as soon as all the actions are completed and we go back to our menu, it should switch back to the menu being primary. Also, if I run away and we go back to the world map, it should leave this as being the primary screen, which is what we want. So if instead, as an example, you wanted to not care about, you wanted it so in combat you always had the monster screen showing, you could just take out this and clause of the script. Make sure to not take out extra parentheses, but you take out this and clause. I'm going to reload the script here in AutoHotKey and go back here. And now it doesn't care that I'm selecting actions. It's always just going to have that screen as the top. You can use it whichever way you want. Again, bear in mind if you use my script, you're still going to have to adjust colors and window positions, but you can see it's still working correctly. It just has a different behavior. I'm going to put these lines back in before I forget because I want them there. But that's definitely up to your choice. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. That's the entire setup. You run AutoHotKey, you put the script in there, you find your pixels and what color they should be, and you input it into the script, and then you run it. Again, keep in mind, one last time, this only works if this window that you're looking at is in focus. For two reasons. One is because of this if command, and the second is because if you select a different window, you're going to be looking at that window's coordinates instead. I think you can also set up AutoHotKey so it's using like monitor coordinates instead of window coordinates, in which case if you move it around the monitor, it's going to break. I didn't want to deal with any of that. I thought there was a way that you could look at pixel coordinates when the window wasn't selected. I didn't have very much luck with it, so I didn't use it. But there may be other options available. This is just how I'm doing it. I hope this is helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to let me know. Script will be in the, it'll be a Dropbox link in the link or in the description of the video. And also I will post links to AutoHotKey and to the Sizer application. So hopefully that's enough to get you up and running. And thank you for watching.